Windhorse is our innate ability to uplift ourselves and our environment by giving rise to a positive energy that is both relaxed and disciplined. Since 1981, Windhorse Community Services has integrated this understanding with modern conventional therapies, meditation, and contemplative traditions in the development of at-home, whole-person mental health recovery. Windhorse Journal is dedicated to the mission of communicating decades of clinical and personal experience to professionals, educators, students, and anyone seeking recovery options. Please join the dialogue.
Welcome to Windhorse Journal Entry 81, Relationships that Invite Health, an Overview of Basic Attendance, Part 2. This is the second half of a conversation between Windhorse clinicians as they discuss basic attendance within Windhorse work. In this episode, Conner Hollingsworth shares a musical review of a client shift, and the group reflects on his experience. They discuss what basic attendance looks like for varying roles on a Windhorse team, and how it can help an individual find their own sense of balance and harmony within the world. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome everyone to this podcast of the Windhorse Journal, and I'm your host, Chuck Knapp. I'm so pleased to be joined here by this distinguished group of Windhorse clinicians, and I will now introduce you all. Laura Ann Samuelson has worked as a team counselor at Windhorse Community Services and as a basic attendant at Windhorse Elder Care since June of 2021. They hold an MFA in dance from the University of Colorado Boulder and are currently an artist in residence at Redline Contemporary Art Center in Denver. They are also a certified practitioner of the Feldenkrais method, a form of somatic education that helps individuals find a greater sense of skeletal connection, ease, and freedom in movement. Right. Conner Hollingsworth moved from Chicago to Boulder in 2014 in order to pursue a master's in music at the University of Colorado. At that time, he began a nearly 2-year tenure as a housemate with Windhorse Community Services and has since moved on to team counselor and assistant team leader roles. The philosophy and contemplative approach of WCS has proved to be a thoroughly harmonious counterpoint to his parallel career as a freelance musician. When Conner is not performing with symphony orchestras and jazz ensembles throughout the Front Range, he enjoys exploring the spectacular hiking opportunities that the nearby landscapes offer. Jeremy Ellis is a team leader and assistant team leader at Windhorse. He began his journey at Windhorse Community Services as a housemate in 2015. He enjoys a variety of contemplative and creative practices and is currently obsessed with his new Instant Pot. Jeremy, what is an Instant Pot?
Oh, it's a newfangled version of a pressure cooker.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Kathy Emery is a graduate of the Naropa University's East-West Psychology program in 1980, which then it was Naropa Institute, and has been actively working with the Windhorse approach to treatment and care since its inception in 1981, when it was first called Maitri Psychological Services. She's currently employed with Windhorse Elder Care and Windhorse Community Services as a team supervisor and psychotherapist. She's also a senior teacher of the approach and feels a lifelong commitment to bringing the contemplative view and practice of care and therapy into her work with individuals and groups, as well as through her teaching and writing. Kathy, you are one of the co-founders of the whole catastrophe, and we've been fortunate to work together for a long time. It's nice that you could be part of this, because you were actually part of the group that developed basic attendance. So, Jack Gipple. Jack is our clinical services manager here at Windhorse Community Services, and you earned your master's in transpersonal psychology in 1991 and have worked extensively with families, couples, individuals with issues related to behavioral and substance addictions, as well as a wide range of mental health challenges. You've taught at the Naropa Contemplative Psychology Department for a long time. You were affiliated with the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless since 1992. You've had your hand in writing some very nice pieces on the Windhorse approach. And you also have taught Tai Chi since 1985, and you are a top bar beekeeper, pinhole photographer. yogi, gardener, home orchardist, father, and husband. So thank you again all for being here. And I'm going to start us off with a quick, about 3-minute overview on what we'll be doing today. That's going to be followed up by a story that Lorianne, you're going to be presenting about being on a basic attendance shift with a client. So you're not going to be stuck with me just talking forever. So the Windhorse approach is health-based, meaning that we understand all people to be fundamentally sane and inclined to return to health and balance when the right conditions are present. In this view, confusion or extreme mental states, or some use the term mental illness, are temporary obstacles, more like clouds that may obscure the brilliance of the sun. But just as the sun is never diminished by clouds, likewise our sanity is not diminished by our confusion, so it's always there as our deepest ally. We know this can really sound like wishful thinking, but it's actually our experience both personally as well as in our extensive work with clients and families. At its most basic level, the Windhorse approach is characterized by creating individually tailored, whole-person recovery environments which invite that person's sanity and health and balance. Whole person here means that we consider and include all aspects of a person's life in the therapeutic process. Our environments are grounded in their physical and domestic world. We cultivate open and healthy relationships. And of course, we work to help our clients to clarify and understand their minds and emotions. The primary way that we develop this environment is through relationship. We'll often refer to Windhorse as relational medicine, as we know that when a person is experiencing mental confusion or distress, it's almost always helpful to be in the midst of people with healthy lifestyles and relatively healthy minds. We actually experience health to be surprisingly contagious, so we create teams specific to each client's personality and interests in order to jumpstart their connection with ordinary, wholesome life activity. Things such as keeping their home in good order, developing healthy habits of eating, sleeping and exercise, engaging in their interests, meeting people outside of the team, which will often involve the greater Windhorse community, school, and work. A big part of the effectiveness of our approach is that we're not trying to make our clients into someone they're not. We're actually supporting them to be the most integrated and harmonious version of who they most basically are and who they most know themselves to be at their core. Another part of the power of our environments is that we have a number of complementary roles involved in a team, starting with the housemate, who's a staff person living in the therapeutic household, the team counselors, who spend the most time with the client in the midst of ordinary life activity, the team leaders, who organize the activity of the team and also spend time with the client in the household, the psychotherapist, who meets with the client usually twice per week, the team supervisor, who tends to the overall activity of the team and also works with the family. And if medications are used, the psychiatrist is also an integrated part of the team. So the client is also fully included as a team member, likewise families when possible, and together we all create a system of relationships that's resilient and which can flexibly adapt as the recovery path evolves. This team and the environment that everyone creates is clearly a more powerful and intelligent therapeutic system than the sum of its parts. So that was a very broad stroke description I just gave. And in order to bring this alive, Conner, from the perspective of a team counselor, you'll lead us through a description of being with a client and doing basic attendance. From there, our group will discuss the story, noting some of the principles involved with basic attendance, which will be expanded on over the course of this podcast series. So, Conner, you ready to take it away?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to retell what I experienced on a basic attendance shift. And this was with the client that I believe, in pursuit of, really tailoring a team to an individual client. I think I was chosen because this client has a background of musical talent, and we're roughly the same age. So there was just right off the bat kind of offered a nice peer kind of relationship there. But on this particular shift, it was a 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. shift. I arrived to their apartment and the door was answered quickly, and the client seemed pretty indifferent to me being there. There wasn't much of a hello, just kind of letting me in the door. And I pretty immediately noticed just the state of the kitchen area was, in my view, pretty cluttered, with just a variety of the sink's full of dishes, the counters are covered in mail, and the table, the dining table is covered in like art projects, paints, and it's hard to really actually see every little thing that's there. But we check in, and the client pretty quickly wants to go back to. He seems to be playing a video game in the living room. So I sit with him, and then realize he's not playing a video game. He's watching a YouTube video of other people playing a video game, and it's really important that he sees the results of those people playing the game. And he tries to explain why, and I'm having a bit of a hard time following. And I just ask if he's had any breakfast. My mind's kind of on the kitchen, so I want to see if there's any opportunity to maybe organize it a little better. And he's remembers he has some yogurt that he needs to eat, and he wants to get a coffee or make a cup of coffee, and he offers me a cup of coffee, which I really appreciated. And I just ask if he wants any help tidying up the kitchen. I'm kind of like just looking at the sink, and it actually goes pretty more smoothly than I would have imagined. We just kind of work together on putting everything from the sink into the dishwasher and run a load, and then I feel pretty like we can move on to something else at that point. I noticed there are some like interesting dice on the counter that have like not a normal 6-sided dice, but like something from like another game or something like that. Sees me looking at them and tells me he's created a board game. He's kind of inventing his own board game, and asks if I want to learn how to play it, because he's trying to get each of the team members to play this board game on our shifts. And so he takes me back to the living room, and the board game kind of involves a risk board is like the main area, but it extends throughout the living room. It uses books, pieces of other games, and it's very interesting. And he's trying to explain to me, how to play it. And he seems so certain and imaginative, and like he's clearly explaining something, but I can't follow it. So I really kind of ask him to help me through it, because I want to participate in it. And it turns out he was watching that game earlier to kind of the outcome of that game determined like which dice I roll and how many times I roll it. So it was related. And I eventually make my roll and make my move, and he kind of helps me throw it, and I just can't make sense of it. So once that's through, I see his guitar, and I just find some comfort in seeing his guitar and ask if I can play it. And there's a book of like some Irish fiddle tunes next to it. So I start trying to read through one of them on the guitar and ask if he wants to pick up his violin and try and play some music together, and he happily does. I realized pretty quickly that the instruments are really out of tune with each other, but I'm actually kind of amazed at his ability to deal with that and still make it sound like we're playing something. And so we kind of slowly chug through the tune, stopping here and there to kind of like fix rhythms and fix notes, check the key signatures. And we play through it again, and he just starts making more like sound effects and kind of improvising. So I kind of like follow along with them, and it totally veers off into a more experimental like soundscape. And he really wants to record what we were doing. So he sets up a microphone and we record it. But as soon as he starts recording, he also starts playing a record of Mozart violin concerto. The turntable has a speed adjustment, and he's got it at like 3/4 or a half speed or something. And so we're playing along with that. And it's just, I'm starting to get like kind of disoriented in the in the cacophony of it all. We do that for 5 minutes or so, and I asked if he wants to listen to it back because I want to hear his impression of what he hears back. And so we play it back, but he, instead of listening back, wants to record more sound effects and other things on top of it. So it begins getting a little even more experimental. We're finding anything around the house to make noise with, like metallic objects, or at one point I'm turning the vacuum cleaner on and off to create a sound effect. And I just start to feel pretty confused, and whether or not what I'm doing is enabling some sort of detachment from discipline or reality or something like that. So, we eventually just wind down on that. And my thought is I want to get some fresh air from that. So I asked if he wants to just go hang out on the patio, and he wants to go have a cigarette. So we go out there and just kind of talk about, first of all, how interesting and fun that was. It wasn't something we had done before, but also, what kind of music we might want to work on a future shift. And so we can kind of build upon what we did and maybe keep going and adapting to each other's ways of creating music. And that was the shift.
As you were describing that, Conner, I was imagining being a trained musician like you are, and tolerating the experience of so much free form that didn't seem to have a coherent center. And I don't know, how was that for you?
It was tough, but that was even from the very beginning, when the instruments were really out of tune with each other, I had to really decide like how picky I wanted to be, or how much I wanted to direct this. Because the more I just was thinking, the more I was going to be directing and correcting and telling him how to tune his instrument, and that it would be less collaborative. And so I was trying to find that middle ground of where we could work. And I was also just trying to be open-minded and see where the experience would go.
It was also a step it sounds like it was also significant step being more grounded than it was him watching of YouTube of a video game of other people playing. That's a pretty disconnected space in a few ways versus playing music together.
I think that part of it was, when I arrived, it seemed like there was a disconnect from his environment or his body, because I arrived and it didn't seem to phase him from what he was occupied with. So being able to play music together just seemed like a really great opportunity to get both of us using our bodies, with the instruments, and it having a direct effect on our environment and having to relate to that.
You were interacting. I'm struck by the first story is, they're both pretty out there feeling as you tell them, like the second part. But the big difference is, in the first one, he's kind of amplifying his own mind states with things on the computer and this elaborate game. He's kind of blowing up into the whole living room or the house, and then you kind of join in, and it's kind of beautiful. You like slid right in, and you started rolling dice with him. And I mean, it seems like you stayed in a very similar territory in a way, but you were introduced as the another element of another mind he was interacting with, and you didn't like take over things. You just kind of joined into the system, and just that fact turned the whole thing. in a kind of interesting way. And yeah, I love that. It was you rode the wave out like kind of right through, Conner. So
Yeah. You're so attuned to him, Conner. You're so attuned. It was really beautiful to watch. And then you went right into the way it blossomed into this sense perceptions, out into the sound and the feel, even like he's holding his instrument, and it just became more embodied. Yeah. I mean, and it was still chaotic. There still was that element, like you said, of the cacophony and the chaos. And
I'm glad that you asked yourself that question. Like, is this helping or is this, what am I doing here? Like, I love that you're like self-reflecting about, is this adding to this issue or is it helping?
Taking a fresh look at this story, how would you describe basic attendance in action in this story? Somebody.
I keep seeing Conner in this, as he was talking, from walking in the kitchen, beginning to thinking it's a video game, but then realizing it's the replay of a video game. And it just as it kind of evolved, it sounds like I just imagined you kind of like in the forest in a way, and finding these different openings of going, oh, can we bring the kitchen into whatever's happening here? And also, how do I take care of myself in this too, so that there's, in terms of being the team counselor on the shift, of going like, okay, how do I relate to this sort of state that's happening, and how can I join it? And there's something around, what can this person hold, and you end up in this sort of experimental music moment that makes space for the state that they're already in, but then also introducing moments of going, oh, well, why don't we listen to the recording? Or, hey, let's take a break. And finding ways of relating to this finding these kind of healthy ways of relating to this creative process that you start collaborating with him in. It sort of brings in these steps, or these ways in which you take care of yourself in the context, kind of models how he can take care of himself in the midst of what's happening.
A big part of basic attendance, I think, is identifying that our clients often are really gifted in a lot of ways, and they're probably so used to being identified with their illness that it's really easy to overlook that there's so much more that they have to offer, and sometimes it's their illness gets in the way of, or just becomes an obstacle, or also could be involved in their more, their talents in complex ways.
That's a really good point about talent intermixing oftentimes with people's confusion, and how do we join people? How do we find places to join with their intelligence and passion in life? Sounds like that was a beautiful example of you doing that. And it wasn't like you sat down and played tight music. You met him where he was.
He didn't crash in and like take over and go, oh my God, this place is a mess. We have to do the dishes. And like, he didn't start to like, do violence to his world. You just kind of slid into it and affected it and stayed awake in that process. So.
To me, those are always some of the trickiest moments, because, I think part of all of us, when we go into an environment that doesn't suit how we would feel would be healthy, how do we not impose too much and kind of allow the client to be the client, but at the same time offer some sort of feedback or interaction with their how they have their environment.
There's also something interesting, like I'm thinking about experimental noise traditions and like experimental music, and
yes,
just this space of kind of bringing in and your knowledge and intelligence around
Mm-hmm.
how there can be space for what's happening, or how to find ways of entering into these forms that actually other people have been doing for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know, just like looking at that as a same, you know, these same traditions of experimentation, and how do we make space for people who, oftentimes folks who are negotiating a certain level of mental illness, their worlds can get a little bit policed in a kind of way, or regulated in a sense of everyone wants to see them demonstrate something that quote unquote is considered normal behavior. And that there's actually all of these other ways of orienting to the world and orienting to each other. And it feels like there's something in you being an artist that actually feels like allowed you to create this bridge that is not just a bridge to you, but it's also a bridge to other traditions of music that have been occurring for a long time. Anyway, that's kind of what was coming up for me as you were talking.
Yeah, I guess I'm just appreciating, Conner, in your description. I mean, one, it just sounds really interesting. I wish I could have been there, frankly. But there was so much like what I would call fearlessness and warmth, and or at least that's what I'm hearing in your experience of entering into who knows what. I mean, that game that the client showed you, who knows what is contained in that game, right? There could be all kinds of insight and creativity and intelligence built into that system. But it may be, for many people, that might be overwhelming and complex and a scary thing to get into. So I just really appreciate hearing like your ability to like, it sounded like you're real, like genuinely curious and attuned and trying to understand this person's what they've created. And then your use of yourself is sort of a barometer of like almost like imbibing the environment, imbibing the situation, and then going, I could use a little fresh air. What about you? And offering that invitation. So, you know, fully offering yourself to go into the game, to the music, and then fully offering your experience of something maybe different or fresh. And so, yeah, I'm just, there's a real sense of generosity actually in what you described. And I'm curious what you would have done if he didn't want to do the dishes. If he said, no, you do my dishes.
That's a good question. In a situation like that, I think it depends on how you're feeling, I think, in relating to it. If it really bothers you, or if it really bothered me, I would ask if they minded, you know, because our work isn't to just do everything for them, but it is to help foster a healthy environment. And if they can't use their sink because it's full of dishes, to me, it might be more helpful to just get them out of there into the dishwasher. I wouldn't feel like I was working below my pay grade or anything like that. I think that's part of creating their environment or contributing to it.
Threading through what you all are talking about here with that experience, Jeremy, great, kind of taking it right to some of that, you know, like what do you do? What do you do when you're in the position you feel kind of stuck and you're not sure whether to, you know, kind of bring somebody along a little harder or let them alone. You know, you're trying to gauge what's going on there. And I come back to the mindfulness discussion we had in the previous podcast, and tuning. And I'm just curious how you all think about, Conner, and how you think about the mindfulness aspect of basic attendance and attuning yourself to that situation and watching your own mind.
Well, basically, in a situation like that I can see my mind kind of being split in two directions. One is, we need to clean this place. Like, we need to make make this organized. This is a mess. We need to tune your violin. We need to only play what's written on the page. And then the other end is, who cares? I like all this art you're doing, and let's make more. Let's just get messy with it and let's turn everything all the way up and just get lost in the environment we're creating. So it's like realizing that and then finding somewhere in between and seeing where the client is willing to go with that, to go along with you, and kind of realizing that this could go an infinite amount of ways. And to me, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, it sticks out to me how much it sounds to me like you had to follow yourself very carefully through the whole shift and keep checking in, instead of having some idea about like, this is the right way to handle this situation I'm in, or or going, oh yeah, this is the plan. It sounds like from moment to moment you actually let yourself respond and go, oh, let's go with it. Oh, maybe now's a good moment to take a little break. Am I going to bring up the thing about the kitchen? Sure, I'll bring up the thing. Like just checking in, because what's right, at the beginning of the shift may not feel right at the end of the shift, and vice versa. It sounds like how you're relating to like the ongoing evolution of it feels like a really important part of it.
And it personally, it felt really good to question my own idea of what the music we were creating should be. Like, I am aware that I don't play a lot of experimental, like highly improvisatory music, and I can learn a lot from experiencing that and doing that, and seeing having to adapt to a musical environment I don't expect. So in that way, he kind of brought me along to pushing my own comfort zones and getting something out of it I wouldn't have expected or wouldn't have planned.
Yeah, I think it's so beautiful, your openness in many areas of this experience you just shared, but with the music, your openness and curiosity, and I don't get any sense of judgment anywhere from you, even though you had these different mind sets going on, and but it just really was quite brilliant, how you navigated all of that, given you are a musician, and what you brought to it. So
I love what you said too about like the layers. One part of it's happening, and then all of a sudden, okay, now the vacuum cleaner becomes part of it, and then you've got the replaying what you were just playing, and then he starts playing a record with it, and just kind of this sense of that there's actually some intelligence, like you're really seeing the intelligence of this person that actually knows how to bring themselves through this maze that you may not actually know the way through yet. And so there's something kind of interesting about seeing that this person has a map, actually, in some sense, of how they're kind of making their way from one logic to another as they layer. And then you're going, okay, how do I follow this person? And then what can I also offer? Which might be taking a break or going outside or checking in, things like that. But it's not actually saying you need to abandon this way in order to join me in this other way. I feel like there's a lot of honoring of the inherent wisdom in this individual.
And I think Jeremy observed that too in talking about the game and the music we're creating. Just it's really it's all insight into the client's mind, and that's what we're trying to get to know, because how else do we know what to do if we really have no insight into how they relate to the world? So I think it is important you're required to go into it with a certain amount of openness, and also, like in the example of the game, I felt a lot of comfort knowing that he was playing this with other team members, and that there could be that collaboration of combining basic attendance experiences how did it go for, another basic tender, or how are they, how are they perceiving it, and just getting a more complete picture.
So I want to make a comment on something you said earlier about how intelligent he was. Boy, I remember when I first started recognizing that most of my clients were a lot more intelligent than I am. I just happened to have more balance at that point than they may have had. That's why they were there. So you were able to meet him, go into that world, at the same time wash the dishes. And over time, part of our work is to meet people where they are, create relationship, develop safety and trust, and keep washing the dishes, keep helping them connect with their passion in life, help them get to a place where their passion and intelligence is really working for them, not creating absorption states that desynchronize them in life. And so you were with this person at that stage. And when he sounded like he was pretty inclined towards absorption and imbalance, kind of tuning out of his environment, did that progress to a point where he was able to have more balance and be able to move beyond the team?
This person became very involved with community programs.
Oh,
Was doing art projects,
That's right. Yeah.
in the community space, was active in the coffee houses, was presenting, was doing their own music, doing his own music with an amp, and so expanded, widened the circle, of his engagement with his passion with other. Yeah, very creative, and actually had a job. He had some jobs in there. He was a Grubhub driver for a while, and so expanded out.
okay.
Yeah.
So his time with us, his community expanded, took care of his world in a different way, became employed in places, and that was how his path evolved here.
Well, yeah. What I remember too is actually on that shift, part of the clutter or the mess was an art project he was working on that he presented at a Windhorse coffee house event. So he was bringing some of his absorption or his getting lost in his art out to the greater community, and offering it and checking out what other people are doing. And and also like Kathy said, he did get employment for Grubhub as well as a dishwasher, and actually really he had really enjoyed that work. He spoke really fondly of his experience there.
I'm just imagining a scenario where someone like this client, is playing wild music and doing wild art, and people are coming in and going, "You need to do your damn dishes. Like, we're taking away your violin. We'll give you your art materials back when you vacuum the rug." And so, yeah, I'm just sort of touched by the amount of dignity that it sounds like he was treated with, and therefore able to expand out in part because of that.
I keep wanting to go back to the question of like, what's the difference between a basic attendance shift and psychotherapy in the office, because we do both in Windhorse. I'm just struck by a lot. I mean, in some ways, it's the same. It's exactly the same. And the big way it's different is you're in his apartment with all of the world and the objects and the things of the world to work with, and you're following his process, and you're following your process and yourself, and you're not leaving yourself out of it, and you're not leaving your sense of, is this, you're questioning, is this useful or is this not useful? All the same things go on in a psychotherapy session in a Windhorse team when the client's meeting with the therapist. The big difference there is there's much less of a manifest like physical environment around you to work with. There is, of course, the physical environment, but it's much more static because it's the therapist's space. then the kind of variety and the places you can go and improv and joining and all this same stuff goes on in more of a, a mind and heart realm. So it's happening in a different zone, but it's the same things are going on. Like when the therapist hopefully isn't crashing in and taking away their violin, metaphorically, and doing violence to their feelings and thoughts, because therapists are certainly capable of that, but that's not what we aspire to at Windhorse. We try to. It's all the same things that you're talking about. So it makes me happy to hear your description in basic attendance, and that it's congruent with what goes on in psychotherapy.
And it comes also back, Jack, to what you're, I think, getting at there too, is that whether you're in the office or in the more physically, relationally embodied space of a basic attendance contact like that, you're helping the person understand their own mind and come to a more harmonious and balanced version of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that the intelligence isn't taking them off in imbalanced ways, but coming back to more of the genuine expression of who they are and how it can work in the world.
Yep. Makes me think of the story that Ed Podville, when he was writing the book that he had initially published as
Seduction of Madness.
Seduction of Madness, that his writing, his working title was Intelligence Run Wild. Which is kind of just what you're talking about. It's like there can be like brilliance, but it just goes wild, and that's what we might consider imbalance. And this client you're describing, it's got that quality of like, wow, this could be brilliant and it could be wild and just like disconnected and dysregulated, and so.
And at the same time, not rewriting the client's priorities. Like, I think there's something in it, and it reminds me to what Chuck said about recovery looking different for every person, where it's you're really giving the client a space to look at and sort of tailor for themselves their own priorities around attending to their bodies, attending to their desires, attending to their environment, attending to what they care about or their, awesome, weird, edgy art. And there's a way of not trying to rewrite those for a person. And I feel like there's something really beautiful in this example of letting the client actually kind of tailor, okay, what's the balance for me between doing the dishes and working on this project? And how do I kind of how do I become more aware of myself so that I can tell when I'm moving past something that is working for me, whether it's artistically or in my own sense of sanity or in how I feel in my body. Kind of giving these places where you can touch in by creating these opportunities to touch in instead of rewriting how we think a person should be.
I appreciate everyone's input and questions, and this was a great discussion. And Conner, thank you very much for sharing that really interesting and descriptive ride through that time with the client. I hope people listening to this and watching this can get a good feel for how we join with our clients and a bit of a feel for how basic attendance works. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for listening to Windhorse Journal Entry 81. We hope you tune in next month as we continue this series on basic attendance and how it manifests within each of the roles on a Windhorse team. Next month's conversation will highlight relationships that invite help, basic attendance within the role of a housemate.
Windhorse Journal is a publication of Windhorse Community Services, supporting recovery from mental health challenges at home and in the community since 1981.